This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, Winston. Lovely to have you on this webinar with us. And thank you for an awesome challenge.
Amen. I really appreciate the interest from all the Zindi folks, and yeah, excited for the conversation today.
Great. Well, I'm going to hand it over to you straight away, so you can walk us through what Alvin app is. Anyone on the chat, please can you hold your questions until Winston's finished, or you can pop them in the chat. Once he's finished, we'll go through them. Over to you, Winston.
Thank you, Amy. So I guess to give a bit of background on the company itself. So Alvin, as an institution, we're building a consumer app called the Alvin app, as well as an enterprise offering, both of them designed to basically provide smart money management solutions to consumers throughout Africa. Our services are intended to really solve two use cases, especially on the enterprise side. So the first one is we want to use customer data to create more personalized experiences, starting off with automated transaction categorization, such that banks in particular are able to cultivate more credit-worthy customers across their existing customer base. That's the first use case. Second use case is looking to also tie spending, like a customer spending, to their savings performance, such that fintechs, like wealth techs, savings tech companies, et cetera, are able to increase their savings yield via features like automated savings contributions based upon where a person spends day to day. So the work that you guys are doing to help us build basically the foundation for what we call our data enrichment service is going to look something like this in the first feature. So I'm going to share my screen to show you guys what this looks like.
Great, we can see your screen.
Excellent. All right, so this first product is called Bank Account Aggregation. So this we're offering to banks in Kenya and Nigeria this far. We've gotten a lot of demand for it, so we're really excited for the work that you guys end up doing to kind of help us advance on this initiative. And essentially what this does is it enables for a bank, say in this case, Stanbic, one of the banks that we're speaking to make their retail banking app the central source of financial truth across all of a person's accounts. So currently, say in Kenya, the average Kenyan doesn't use their debit card for most of their transactions, right? They use mobile money, they use M-Pesa, right? Which are the transactions that you guys have in the data set. Now, as a result, Stanbic currently is very limited as to the scope of a person's expenses that they can see, which means that they're not able to make lending decisions in a very informed way. So basically, we went to them and said, okay, there are two things that we can do to kind of help you solve this problem. The first one is we can provide to you a product that will enable for your customers to hook up their M-Pesa or their KCB account, et cetera, to their Stanbic app, such that they're able to manage their balances across multiple accounts from their Stanbic app, right? Driving up app engagement on that app. And then with that as a foundation, and again, this is the work that you guys are doing now. We also can provide them with an automated view of how their transactions should be categorized. Right, so I'll kind of run through a demo really quick right now. I'll try to keep this brief. And then as Amy said, if folks have questions at the end, more than happy to answer them for you. So say here, a person would go through the onboarding, understand like how they're able to link their accounts. The information, of course, stays confidential and is protected by the bank. Accept terms and conditions. And then here, I'll just kind of run through this very quickly, but basically we use a partner called Mono in Kenya for the backend integration of multiple banks to our service. And then, of course, we then are going to be doing the transaction categorization as a service, first as a foundational piece, and then on top in the future, we'll be layering in other features, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is where they would go through the Mono onboarding. Say I'm looking to hook up my M-Pesa account. I then would put in my phone number, PIN that I would use for Safaricom. Within their app, they would then show like this, okay, we're seeing transactions, we're hooking up, the account that you just authorized. Then here, a person will be able to see a categorized view ultimately of the transactions that are unique to, say, their Stanbic Bank debit card, right, versus transactions on their M-Pesa. Okay, and then ultimately, like I said, once we have this as a foundation, and this is the first product that we're going to market with, we'll then be able to layer in really sexy features again that are serving both of those key use cases that I mentioned at the beginning of the call. Right, so the first one again is helping banks cultivate more creditworthy customers. Right, so that looks like self-adjusting dynamic budgets. Right, once we're able to see retroactively, this is how a person is spending, and also these are say what a person's savings goals are. We're also able to see. We're also able to assess what that person's total income is. Right, we can then take that information and then automatically present to, say, a Stanbic customer. This is what your life should look like in order to ultimately get to the savings goal, right? And so the idea there is like to basically help the bank cultivate more people who are able to stay out of overdraft and actually get on the path to being able to qualify for a more interesting financial product like a loan to buy a car, right? That's on one side. On the other side, a second use case as far as increasing savings yield, with that, a person will be able to, again, with this really strong data enrichment service as a foundation, a person will be able to say, Stanbic, I want to automatically top up toward my savings goal by 1,000 shillings every time I go to a restaurant, right? So here again, as we're able to provide the service to Stanbic, where for the first time they'll be able to see, and their customers will be able to see really in a very simple way, this is how I'm spending, right? By way of automated categorization, we'll then be able to provide them with this feature that whenever we're able to register that they've gone to, say, a restaurant, we're able to automatically top up toward their savings account also already at Stanbic. So I'll pause there because I imagine folks may have questions, but that in effect is what we're doing as a company. And so again, just kind of make it very clear as far as like the specific purpose of this first project. Basically, what we're looking for is a foundation for this data enrichment service, which again we're going to be using for our bank optimized products as well as for our fintech optimized products.
We have a question. Is there any baseline strategy that you use to label transactions by yourself?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So we as a company, like I was saying at the beginning of the call, we started off with the consumer app. So the app is called the Alvin app, which I know you guys saw in the description provided in association with this challenge. And the purpose of starting off with the consumer app was to allow for us to get manually categorized transactions as the foundation for our model. So the categorizations that you guys see in the train set, every single one of those were done by humans, right? These are done by Alvin app users. Now, once we had like the baseline for those first categorizations having been done, we then applied a simple algorithm where whenever one person goes to a merchant, say that we're able to identify, okay, this is merchant X, right? Once one person goes to that merchant, our system then checks, okay, have at least three people gone to this merchant and categorize that merchant in a particular way, and are 70% of these categorizations the same? If yes, then we'll go ahead and just apply those retroactively to everyone else who's also gone to say that merchant, and then everyone going forward. That particular categorization decision becomes a recommendation for those individuals as well.
Great, that answered the question.
You're welcome.
We have a bunch of other questions. Can I go through them, or do you have anything else to share?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Cool, let's shoot. First question, is this a multi-label or a multi-class problem? The answer to this is that it is a multi-class problem. There are 13 classes you are trying to predict. Either, I'm going to use an American example here because I am not Kenyan, and I think just with globalization, we can all relate to America. So if we're thinking about a Starbucks, we'll think of a Starbucks as a restaurant to sit in. So that would probably be categorized or classified as a restaurant. However, you can purchase things to take home. So that could also be classified as groceries. So it is a multi-class problem, not multi-labeled. Yeah. Next question is, We've seen this pop up a couple of times, and I'm going to direct this to Darius, who is our Zindi data scientist. He's known as Brainiac on the leaderboard, if anyone has seen him. Darius, is log loss the appropriate error metric for this challenge?
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, so log loss, I think, is the most appropriate evaluation metric. That's because if we use accuracy, we do not want a model that predicts just some of the categories so well, but then it does not predict other categories. So the good thing about log loss is that it penalizes incorrect predictions. So the end model that you get with a very good log loss is well balanced and can predict other, like it can predict all categories instead of just putting weight on just one category. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Darius. If anyone has any other questions, please drop them in the chat or interrupt us if you'd like further explanations. Excuse me. Are we trying to predict what the next transaction a user will make, or what transaction you recommend to them? We're not doing any future recommendations. We're trying to predict once a transaction has been made, once I've gone to Starbucks, what would you classify that as? You would classify that as a going out trip. Winston, is this correct?
Totally correct. Yes.
Should probably be using African or Kenyan examples, but my mind is blank at the moment. Winston, I'd like you to add to this, but in the competition description, we say that the client, you are interested in exploratory data analysis, features, and a strong classification model. So we've put this in there because through our discussion with you, we've realized that you're really interested in the statistics behind the model and in interesting stats and graphs. You are looking for a strong model that you can use straight away, but you're also interested in the data analysis that went into creating that model. So is there any type of stats that you're looking for specifically? Yeah, anything that you'd like to see on top of a model?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think from our standpoint, something that would be very interesting for us to glean from this exercise is how do I say this? Insofar that every categorization recommendation has a number of different options that would have a non-zero statistical, it's also a hard word for me to say, statistical significance associated with them. I think it would be interesting to kind of understand what are the main parameters, what are the main levers that are being used in order to yield categorization recommendations that have, say, north of a 70% accuracy expectation. And the reason why I say that is for the following reason. So like I was mentioning earlier, this whole work that we're doing with Zindi and the amazing folks who signed on to the project is really foundational for a lot of future work that we're doing. The reality is currently in Kenya, there isn't a single service, including Safaricom itself, the manager of Pace, there isn't a single service that has a full view, say, on all of the informal merchants who are not even registered with like a merchant till number, for example, right? The woman, I always give the example, like, this woman who sits on the corner of my block and she sells beetroot and bananas, right? And people pay her and she's entirely invisible as being groceries, right? And so Alvin intends to use this program with Zindi to be the foundation for like this data enrichment service that is able to, over time, even predict her as being groceries. Now, in order for us to ultimately get into this end goal, one thing that we're keen to understand now is like, what are the different things we should be like looking to optimize for that could help yield a more statistically significant result when it comes to transaction categorization. And over time, we'll definitely be thinking about different And in fact, we already are starting to think about different tactics in order to provide more information, like more data points, basically. Whether it's GPS, neighborhood of residence, things like that, in order to kind of like support with that initiative. But just understanding perhaps at the end of the challenge, like what are the top 5 levers that end up yielding a result that's north of 70%, I think would be a really great start.
Brilliant. So I think a pro tip here is once you've created your model, please do print out your feature importance. I think that will be really interesting to see. Winston, what is the difference between the 2 columns, merchant categorized at, and then the purchased at column?
Yeah, it's a great question. So purchased at is ultimately, actually, let me take a step back. So before I jump directly into the question. So it's important to remember that all of this data came from our Alvin app user information, right? And the reality is that when the transaction actually was made, and we know that transaction was made because of the SMS receipt that we get from M-Pesa, right? And that has a timestamp associated with it. There sometimes can be a difference between when that actual SMS was received and when our backend system was able to register that transaction and then ran the categorization logic to categorize that transaction. So they generally speaking should be not so far off, but in some cases there can be a slight delay.
Well, saying that sometimes they're not far off, the next question. Certain rows merchant categorized at is before purchased at. Could you explain that, please?
Merchant categorized is before. Yeah, so the idea here is so we once, like I was saying before, like once we had the foundation of first categorizations that were made by users, we then applied a categorization recommendation logic that basically said, okay, if this merchant was visited by a Alvin, like any Alvin user, it doesn't have to be the same person, right? If it was visited by a Alvin user before this particular transaction was made, then retroactively we should look at that previous categorization and then make that recommendation to the new one. So sometimes that will happen with the system where looking back in the past, like before this particular transaction was made, we were able to see, okay, actually groceries was the recommendation for this categorization before, and then it's applying it to this future transaction that happened today. Not sure if that answers the question.
Just want to reiterate, if you do want to butt in and ask questions, please do. This is your prime time.
May I ask a question, please?
Please go ahead.
So we have 2 data sets, train and test. And there is, I noticed that there is the same people in the train and in the test data set. And moreover, there are the same transactions in the test and train data set. So the transaction ID is different, but the transaction time, the user ID, and the amount of transaction is the same. So there is some kind of data leakage. In this way, when we're trying to, train model overfits with some parameters because it looks at the same purchases amount, the same, demographical parameters such as household, such as age or gender. So I just wanted to ask if this was made for some reason, or maybe that's an accidentally data leakage.
Interesting. I think it might have been accidental. I think sadly our head of engineering was he actually had to call out sick today, so he wasn't able to join the call. This would be definitely an area where I think he would have a firm answer to the question. Amy, after the call, would it be feasible to kind of like take some of these questions that perhaps they're like germane to whether it's our head of data science or head of engineering, and like provide those answers to the entire Zindi team?
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I just wanted to mention that, in this case, it would be, there might be some tricky ways to, get high testing scores because of this data leakage, but it would be bad for generalization when the model will work in a product, with all the clients, but not with the test, but with all the clients. So I guess that there is some kind of data leakage in the data.
Definitely, thank you for bringing that up, Marty.
Yeah, I really do appreciate you bringing it up and considering it before just throwing a model. We are quite confident that there isn't a leak, but we will look into it. Because if there was a leak, just to be a bit cheeky, your scores would be a lot better. But this is not encouragement to exploit any leak that there is. But we will look into it. A question that we have seen pop up twice on the discussion board, and something that has got lots of discussion, is what cross-validation strategies are you using? Does anyone want to share? Darius, do you want to maybe comment on cross-validation for this type of problem?
Yeah, sure. So the main reason usually why we use a cross-validation is to try and not overfit on the training data. So you split the data into different folds. You train on a certain fold and then test on the other fold. A good strategy I would recommend is a stratified k-fold, because as you split the folds, you also maintain the ratios of the category for each fold. So let's say the overall ratios in the categories is maybe, let's say there are 3 categories, and then one category has like 60%. So when you split, stratified k-fold maintains 60% for that category in each fold. So stratified k-fold, I think, is the way to go. If you want to maybe explore other validation strategies, you can also try out a group k-fold. So you can group transactions with the same time, or you can check which column you can use for grouping and then train the models. Yeah. Amy? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was lost on a different tab over there. Great, thank you for that. Does anyone have any comments? Have you tried either strategy, and what are your comments on that? You're going to keep your secret secret. Fine, be like that. Has anyone considered, was this another secret that we're keeping secret? Fuzzy matching. Has anyone considered that? It is an option that you're allowed to use. And then when you're doing it, Darius, you can also comment on how you see fuzzy matching working further on in the future, like a couple of years down the line, and versus now. Oh, maybe you can explain what fuzzy matching is to start off with.
Sure. So fuzzy matching, I think it's using rule-based conditions to try and categorize transactions. So let's say you can also use like something like rejects. So if a category, let's say a transaction has a word like petrol in it, then you can use a rule that if there's a word petrol in this transaction, then definitely this is a fuel type of category. So usually fuzzy match sometimes works well with small data sets, but then as the data set grows, it struggles because you have a lot of transactions with different patterns. So to capture all those patterns is quite cumbersome. That's why we are using machine learning and maybe deep learning, because with machine learning and deep learning, as the data size increases, the accuracies, the performance of the models also increases. So that's why we are pro machine learning and we are not going to use fuzzy match.
Great. I'm glad we could teach you something, Artem. We are out of official questions from the Zindi discussion board. However, I'm going to just let us sit in silence for the next 3 minutes. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question to the Zindi team or to Winston, the founder and CEO of Alvin app, please do. Otherwise, you can type it in the discussion over here and I'll read it out.
A quick question maybe to Winston. External data sets, are we allowed to use external data sets? Or maybe to scrape data from the web?
I think interesting. I would not see an issue with that. I think that insofar that by definition, so ultimately the main ingredient of any transaction that would inform any model would be the merchant name. So any way that we're able to kind of like triangulate the efforts that we've made in order to incentivize the categorization of transactions of our users with the efforts of say users on other platforms that verified proper categorizations for their transactions, I think that would be fine. We just started off with just our own, of course, because it's our own data set, and also we've been able to verify that the transactions were accurate according to our logic.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll put this in the discussion forum, but you can use web scraping if it is legal, and if it does not go against the terms of use or licensing of the website or where you're scraping from. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to end the webinar there. Thank you so much, Winston and Darius, for joining us. Thank you to everyone who joined online and asked questions. We will be sharing this recording, so those who did not make it will be able to view it. Winston, do you have any closing remarks?
No, just one last note of appreciation and thanks to the Zindi team for having organized webinar. Also really excited to see so many submissions already from the great folks in your network, and we're excited to see the final conclusions. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Cheers, everyone. Keep learning. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.